Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name is Radha Priti, and I'm here with a family of seekers. We're reading through the Bhagavad Gita, verse by verse. We are in some serious nectar right now in chapter 5. We're at chapter 5, text 21, and we're only going to do one verse today because it's a really rich verse. There's so much that we can get from this verse. This verse is about, well, we can all probably relate to this, right? This about chasing things that promise happiness, right? Whether it's a shiny car or a promotion at work or the perfect vacation. Right? So we sometimes get so consumed in chasing these things that we don't even really stop to think, is this the ultimate source of happiness? Is attaining this thing really going to make me happy? And the Gita challenges us with that, with this conception that so many of us has. It challenges us to get a new perception of happiness, right? The Gita talks about how real fulfillment doesn't come from external pleasure, but from turning inward and connecting with the deeper parts of ourselves, the soul, and ultimately God inside the heart. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to move from constantly chasing these fleeting pleasures to finding lasting joy. Because it's easier said than done, right? Is we can understand this, we can hear about it, we can talk about it, and then as soon as we, you know, get off this call or walk away from this podcast, our minds can be automatically consumed in some temporary pleasure that promise us this deep satisfaction. So we have to really train the mind, and we'll talk about a process for that today, about how to shift our focus from what the world says will make us happy to what actually brings us peace and fulfillment. And that's our theme. So we'll start with 21, and Stella will read for us whenever you're ready, Stella.
Such a liberated person is not attached to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the supreme.
Nice, thank you. So this verse is describing these verses in this next section and then this one. They describe how a person can reach the level of true equanimity. So being equipoised in both pleasure and pain. So whether external circumstances are enjoyable or distressing, this person remains undisturbed. But that raises a natural question, right? If they're not depending on external pleasures, if they're unshaken by things that are enjoyable or distressing, where are they getting their happiness from? And the answer is, like we talked about, that this comes from within. This inner happiness, it comes from the Atma, from the soul. And a person who's connected to the self and ultimately to the supreme self, to God, experiences a deeper, lasting joy. And this is the happiness of spiritual connection. It's not fleeting or conditional like this material world. It's unlimited. And there's a natural progression here. It's not like it's unfortunately in spiritual life you can't just like turn on a light switch or press a button on a microwave and you're transformed. It's a progression. So the progression is such that we begin by becoming detached from external sense pleasure. So things around us that used to make us happy, we start to kind of pull in a little bit. Maybe we're not so attached to those things, and we start seeking happiness within. And then as our practice deepens, we concentrate more on God. And through that connection, we begin to relish this imperishable happiness. And that's it. God's in our heart, and he's an infinite ocean of happiness if we can connect to that source. And when we turn inwards towards him, we begin to access that joy. And so just we experience this in any of our spiritual practices, how this is like a process, how it's not like we start doing it right away and it's just euphoric, right? It takes some time. Like maybe some of us chant here, maybe we chant God's names. And at first we're chanting, our mind's really restless. We're struggling to focus. Like maybe one round feels like eternity. But with steady practice, We see that that connection strengthens. We acquire more of a taste for it. We become more centered. We become more grounded. And gradually, we become situated in our relationship with Krishna. And this is Brahman realization. This is when we start to experience this. We taste this supreme, boundless happiness that comes with it. But it takes time, sometimes lifetimes. But we have to keep showing up and we have to get through kind of that difficult part and to experience the nectar. So Krishna is saying here that the wise don't depend on external pleasures for happiness, that they find joy within. And this inner connection becomes their source of real lasting fulfillment. But here's the thing, even if we want to turn inwards, so even we're sitting here, we're hearing this, where it's like, yeah, that sounds really good. I want that. Let's do that. It doesn't mean that all of our others' desires just vanish. We've been living in this material world, moving around its material world, conditioned by this material world for lifetimes. That again, it's a process and it's going to take some time. We're gonna continue to get pulled in different directions. Sometimes it's for comfort, for success, for pleasure, for validation. The list can just go on and on. So how do we actually work with that? What do we do with all of these desires? And here's a metaphor that I like that helps me. Our heart is like a garden. So every desire that we have, it's like a seed planted in the soil. And some are weeds, they might look flashy and grow fast. But the problem is with the weeds is that they crowd everything else out and leave us feeling depleted because there's only so much room in our garden. And these are the cravings that scream the loudest, right? These weeds, like buy this, get that, prove yourself, chase this pleasure. Other desires, like our spiritual desires, because we still have these spiritual desires, they're like slow growing fruit trees. They take more patience and care, and their rewards aren't always instant, but they're nourishing. And these are our deeper desires, to feel peaceful, to connect with God, to serve with love, to live life meaningfully. So the question isn't whether we'll have desires. The question is, which ones are we watering? Are we spending all of our energy on the weeds just because they're loud and easy? Or are we quietly tending to the roots of what really fulfills us? And this verse reminds us that if we nourish our deepest spiritual longing, the desire to connect with God, we'll taste a happiness that's not just satisfying, but it's imperishable. But it's a process, and it starts by becoming aware of the desires in our garden and gently choosing to give more sunlight and water and attention to the ones that align with our soul. So we can't pretend that these other desires don't exist. We have desires. But if we can get a little bit more attentive to the desires that are serving us and the desires that are maybe not serving us as much, then we can create a beautiful garden. We can keep the weeds from overrunning our garden. Does anybody want to share anything about that before we dive into it a little bit deeper? Okay, good. So that's what brings us to this next point here is that chasing every desire won't make us happy, but honoring our deepest desire will. And that's kind of what this metaphor is saying. We all carry so many desires. Some are small, some are big, and most go unfulfilled simply because we don't have the time, the energy, or the resources to chase them all. That's definitely my husband for you. He has like a whole list of things that he wants to do, and it's just like every week I'm just constantly running out of time. It just doesn't happen. And maybe it's you dream of nicer clothes or faster cars or a bigger home, right? And whatever we can afford, we get, and then whatever we can't, maybe we feel frustrated or left behind. So what's the answer to that? What do we do? What does material society tell us to do? Push harder, work harder, get another job, get that promotion, hustle. We work overtime trying to fulfill more and more of these desires. rarely even pausing to ask if they'll actually make us happy. This is the craziest thing. It's in this society. It's like we buy these super nice houses and then we're gone all the time working so that we can have these super nice houses so that we can spend like a half hour a day in them before we go to bed. No, and these desires just keep multiplying. We think as soon as we get rid of a desire, that check something off of our list, but no, it just creates like 10 more desires. Like we buy a house and suddenly we want better furniture, right? A renovated kitchen, a landscaped yard. It's just like a treadmill that's just moving, 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 but we're never arriving. We just keep going, keep going. And this is the trap of chasing our loudest desires. They scream at us from every corner. Like ads, trends, social media, all insisting that they hold the key to happiness, whatever it is. But the loudest desires aren't always the wisest. Just like if we think of a noisy room where one person dominates the whole conversation. Anybody know anybody like that? Like they just dominate the whole conversation no matter what. But just because they're the loudest, it doesn't mean that they're saying something meaningful. And the same goes for the voice within us. Our senses will often shout, like luring us towards instant sense gratification, while our deeper, quieter longings get drowned out. And these surface desires are driven by impulse and conditioning. Whatever our conditioning has led us to believe, most of us in this Western world, we buy into the white picket fence, you know, the American dream kind of thing, which there's nothing wrong with. But at the same time, we have to understand that that's not the answer to our happiness. Our real lasting happiness lies in something much deeper than that, something that can't be purchased or worked for in that way. And those deepest desires are rooted in who we are at our core. And that's what the Gita teaches us, that we're not material bodies seeking comfort, that we're eternal spiritual beings, parts of God. And whatever we even find attractive in this world is just a dim reflection of the ultimate beauty and joy that comes from relationship with God. And when we can redirect our desires towards God, we tap into a wellspring of fulfillment that nothing material can match. And this spiritual connection, it's not fleeting, it grows, it deepens, and it stays with us. That's like that's the difference between the material world and the spiritual world. When we're investing time into the spiritual connection, it just grows, deepens unlimitedly. And we carry it on to our next life because our soul is eternal. But when we're investing all of our time, our energy, our consciousness in material things, the nature of the material world is that we may get some amount of enjoyment, but it's going to go away. And then when it goes away, then our heart is just filled with like lamentation, right? Or regret. But spiritual world is opposite of that. It's unending. The satisfaction, the joy, the connection just grows and grows and grows. So this is why the Gita encourages us not to renounce desire altogether, but just be selective about what we desire. Understanding that we're even limited beings. We can't, our bodies are limited, our time is limited, everything is limited. So we have to be selective about what we're desiring. And instead of chasing every little shiny thing, they're the loudest desires in our head, we start listening more closely to our inner compass. And we realize that what we're looking for isn't out there, but it's within. And how do we access that? By becoming intentional, by quieting the noise, by limiting the stimuli that fuels these shallow cravings. And by doing that, we can give space for the deeper ones to emerge. But it's an intentional practice. And then by practicing spiritual life, we begin to reconnect with our truest, most essential longing. And that is the desire to know and love God. And in the end, happiness doesn't come from having it all. Right? We know that many of us have had quite a bit. And then only to get to the other side and realize, what did I do all this for? All these sleepless nights, super hard work. You know, I'm not even happy. I'm miserable. So we've realized that. So the flip side is the happiness doesn't come from all of that. What does it come from? And it comes from aligning with what matters most. It comes from turning inward and honoring the desire that never fades. And that's the desire to live in harmony with who we really are. Material desires fade, right? We want this one day, the next day we want this, the next day that's gone. Now we're after this. But this desire at our core being to live in harmony with who we really are, that never fades. That's always there. Sometimes it's drowned out by all of the clutter of desires, the weeds in our garden that are kind of taking it over. But if we can step back and kind of start to pull out some of those weeds and make a little bit more space for the flowers, we can see that that's actually the most substantial desire and the one that's going to bear the most fruit. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on? Okay, we'll move on.
I'll share real fast.
Oh, great.
Um, yeah, this is just like such a constant, like this topic is such a constant, reoccurring topic, right? Like, at least in my stage of devotion, like, because it's like, I don't know, I just like went through a move. And so during the move, I'm like, oh, I need this thing for my kitchen and I need this so it all functions. And it's not like completely impractical stuff. It is functional things, but it's still like I feel the desire of like newness and needing or wanting, thinking I need or want these things like coming up, right? And then even in like a more simple level, like and again, it's still practical. I'm not like beating myself up for it. I'm just noticing it. Like a lot of my stuff's still in boxes. And yesterday was Ekadashi and I got off work at 3 and I was like, oh, I should go home and I should like unbox and unpack. But it was so nice outside and I was like, I just want to sit outside. I just want to chant. Like I haven't been chanting very nicely lately because I've been moving. And but yet like I still kept feeling the desire like go clean your house, go clean your house. And I'm like, no, like there's nothing else to do but like chant. But it's like I have to like remind myself like I need to still connect with Krishna, or and then not always, but sometimes those moments come up like I need to take the time and the material situation, it's still going to be there. It's still going to need unboxed. You're not going to get it all done tonight anyways. It's okay if it waits another day or two. Like go sit outside, go spend time with your daughter, go chant out in nature, like anyways. And even teaching my daughter like last night we were reading a book and then uh she was like, I want to get this book, or I want to get this, I want to get this, I want to get this. And I'm like, look at all the things that we have. Like, let's just appreciate what we do have, And that's like a constant pull in this world, right? Like, even if we are practicing our spiritual life, it's like still you can feel that pull sometimes. And it's just constantly bringing the mind back to the heart. Like, you don't need all those things. Or like, yeah, it would be nice if, things were more in order or more settled. But really, once you settle within your heart and you feel connected with Krishna, like the rest will happen. It will fall into place, or like you won't need as much. And just constantly trying to like remind the mind that it doesn't need what it thinks it needs. What it needs is to just like be in the heart space, be grateful for what you do have, and you know.
Yeah.
But I just have been noticing that coming up in myself, even, and like having to remind myself. And I go through phases where it's like I'm much more calm and at peace and grateful for everything I have. And then I have moments where like those desires are running rampant, and you're like, oh, I need this and I need this. And I have to do this. And I have to do this. It's like, no, you need to slow down and connect with your heart and chant and do your Krishna consciousness, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I relate so much to what you're saying. And
Yeah.
just getting even in like in this scarcity mentality, like no matter how much you have or how much you do, like it's never enough. And then sometimes we even like create more things because we're just in that mentality. And we can just never detach because we like bind ourselves to this like never ending list of things to do, to buy, to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's a lot of like do. Like I
Mm,
get in the phase of buying, but that one isn't so much. But I get into like, okay, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, yeah,
yeah.
there are certain things, keep the maintenance of certain things, but sometimes it's like too much. It's like, it's okay. You can slow down. You can take a break. It's okay. Like,
Yeah. And then does it happen to you such that when you do that and you do kind of make the time for your heart space, you do make the time to really connect, that like the things that you really thought were so important, it's like you either no longer have to do them or whatever it is, it's like you realize that that's not even as important as you thought it was.
yeah, or once I go to like if it's like a house chore or something, if I like wait and I do like my spiritual practice first, then doing the house chore doesn't feel as like drudgery, you
Yeah.
know? Like it's not like this pressing like, oh, it has to get done right now, like or you're not gonna be able to function. It's like, no, like I feel better now because I did my spiritual activity, and now doing my, seemingly material mundane chore is actually more pleasant. Like
Right.
I don't feel as attached to getting it done,
Yeah.
but I get it done in a nicer way. I don't know if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. Yeah. Totally agree. So nice. Thank you for sharing,
Yeah,
Mariah.
thank you.
Does anybody else want to share anything? Suddenly it's Krishna's house you are cleaning. Oh, that's beautiful, Stella.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it totally works like that. And just that shift of mindset makes it feel blissful. I feel that way with my daughter when I'm in that mindset. I'm taking care of her like as a service. It does. It just makes you feel connected and happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mariah, can I interrupt?
Yeah, please.
Oh, Mariah, since I just moved, I totally identify with what you're saying. It's very, very stressful to move, and it takes a while for you to calm down and get back in balance and back onto what's really important to you because you get so interrupted by having to get these things done.
Yeah, it was intense, and I had a deadline to be out. I mean, I'm
Me
out
too.
now. And
Yeah.
the deadline, like once the deadline was passed and everything was out, I was like, oh, I can breathe again. But I'm still struggling to get back in that routine of like, I can have my routine. The things will get unboxed and put together. Like, and I have most of it unboxed. It's just like, it's just like, okay, you can breathe. You can get in routine. You can make time for your japa again. You can make time for your reading and your classes. And yeah.
Yeah.
I was waking up in the middle of the night with like PTSD saying, oh my God, I got to move boxes. I got to get up and move boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It's
hear
crazy.
you.
Now I wake up thinking somebody's posting fraudulent charges to my account.
Oh.
Well,
That'll go away too.
thankfully, we have Krishna to
Oh
help
my
us.
God. Yes.
Keeps us steady. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, so sometimes, even when we want to grow spiritually, we can feel weighed down by all the rules. Sometimes, does anybody ever feel like that? It's just like there's so many standards, so many rules, so many things that, we that aren't good for us, you know. And sometimes it may even seem like they restrict our happiness. But the Gita wisdom invites us to pause again and question our very definition of happiness. And we often assume that happiness means material happiness, like comfort or success or pleasure. And this assumption runs so deep because it's constantly reinforced by everything around us, their culture, our media, even people close to us glamorize material enjoyment to the point where we rarely even question it. I remember when I was in college wondering if something was wrong with me because I just wasn't getting much joy out of like going to a party, right? Like the typical college scene, it was just like I am so not into this, and wondering if something's wrong with me because everybody around me is so into it. And not that I didn't have my own attachments, meaningless attachments like achievement and performance. Like I just had my own. And eventually, I realized that that wasn't really the answer either. But the point is, most of us are chasing a version of happiness that we've been conditioned to believe, maybe by our upbringing or our peers, the world around us. But the truth is, at best, at best, our bodily capacity to enjoy is limited. That's just at best. That's even if it brings us happiness. A lot of us think things will bring us happiness that don't actually bring us happiness. But say they do, at best, our bodily capacity to enjoy is limited. Material enjoyment is fleeting. It can never fulfill our deep longing for lasting, unending happiness. It's like giving a drop of water to someone who's dying of thirst in a desert. It just doesn't cut it. So the Gita wisdom helps us break free from this illusion in two powerful ways. One, it reminds us that we're souls and that we have an original right to spiritual happiness, and this happiness is far greater than any material pleasure. And two, it offers us practical tools, spiritual practices to actually experience that happiness and realize it, not just hear about it on the theoretical level. So this verse is telling us that when we turn our heart from chasing external pleasures to seeking internal spiritual fulfillment, we'll access a happiness that doesn't fade. And once we begin to taste that spiritual joy, we no longer want to do some of the things that used to make us happy. And instead, we might find ourselves thinking, like, why did I let my assumptions about happiness keep me from the real thing for so long? And many of us are here now, right, with that. And that's why this association of like-minded people is so important, because when we hang out with people that are, convinced that the highest material success will make them happy, or going from car so that they can have the nicest, vehicle. When we're around that mindset all the time, it starts to become our mindset. And we know that mindset doesn't lead us to happiness and fulfillment. So we're trying to kind of wean off of that mindset. So when we hang out with people with the same kind of goals and mindset as us, that also rubs off on us and inspires us, right? And then they kind of become like our partners on this path, like our community, our family. And so that's why, we have to be careful, even in kind of where we're immersing ourselves, because we're conditioned beings, and we'll start to become like our surroundings. I think I saw something on Instagram like that the other day, like the top 5 people that you spend the most time with are the people that you're the most like, you know? So we need to be aware of that, because that, I don't know about you guys, but that's definitely happened to me, where I become convinced that achievement and, is what's going to make me feel connected and happy. And it just doesn't. Does anybody want to share anything about that?
Totally have felt that in my life. You just become who you're hanging out with, and you're just like, wait, this isn't even who I am. And then I unfortunately leave people and sever my relationships, and I'm like, I feel bad, but I just like it wasn't working. I'm sorry. Like even friendships, and then
Yeah.
but now Krishna is like providing so many people in my life and groups that help keep me on track, and I'm so grateful for it.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's so important. It's so important. It's also like to go to the other side and say like, oh, I don't want to think that you can do it alone, to think that you can do spiritual life alone. That's also like a fallacy. We need community, and just like that garden, we have to pick carefully. We have to choose wisely, because it's our consciousness is at risk. People are so worried about like eating the most organic apple, But what about the people that you're constantly surrounded by, and the impact that that's having on your psyche, on your consciousness? Thank you. So then it comes to a matter of, things that you used to do, you're not doing anymore. Or, things that you used to really pursue intensely, you're not so much anymore. And it may be like, okay, it's turning away, running away. That may kind of come to us or people around us, And what's actually happening here is that we're turning towards something better. So it's like, let's say that there's someone who always agitates us, and we choose not to engage with them. It's not necessarily because we're being cowardly, but maybe we're turning away not because we're afraid, but because we're headed towards somewhere, or something important. Right? So the focus isn't on escape, it's on purpose. So similarly, when we act with clarity and purpose, even if we do encounter that agitating person again, we can stay calm. We'll be polite. We'll keep it brief, and we'll move on because we know what we're about, and where we're headed. So we need the same kind of purposeful mindset when facing agitating or tempting things out in the world. When we commit to our spiritual life, we often resolve to stay away from things that distract us. And when these temptations arise, turning away from them might feel like a weakness, but it's not. It's actually a strength. Things that pull us away from who we actually are. Maybe like going out and partying. It's like that's kind of like reinforcing the idea that kind of relief is the relief that's satisfying to our heart. And once we, learn about spiritual life and we start to experiment with it a little bit, we realize that actually going to bed early and waking up early to spend that time really connecting with God in the mornings actually doesn't just provide relief for our heart, but provides connection and love for our heart. And so we start turning towards that more. And it's not that we're running away from what we used to do, but we're running towards something that's more fulfilling to our heart. And what are we running towards? We're running towards that divine presence within. And this is what the Gita assures us, right? That by turning away from those temporary outer pleasures and towards our spiritual nature, we can access this lasting, imperishable joy. And this is by cultivating our relationship with God. So that said, we don't need to become obsessed with avoiding temptations, or, this can lead to frustration and repression. But we need to aim for balance, staying grounded in our purpose, clear on our direction, and compassionate with ourselves as we grow. I think about this sometimes, like, I'm raising a daughter now, and think about like taking her places. And I was talking to Genevieve Harrison's mom. I don't know if you guys know her, but I was talking to her and I was asking her, how she was able to stay balanced, because kids like to have fun, but at the same time, you want to introduce them to spiritual life. And the advice that she gave me was something like that, that like we would do something spiritual. I'd take them to a spiritual festival or something. And then while we were there, we'd do something fun, like go to the beach or, and I just thought that was really nice because it's like we have to stay balanced. We can't just like not like only do spiritual things. That's if we're, you have kids but at the same time, we kind of strike that balance. We kind of make things fun. And anyway, so I kind of try to keep that in mind because I have a tendency to like go overboard sometimes. And I want to make sure to try to stay balanced in that perspective so that I'm not even like turning people away because it could be a little bit too much. And we still have to, connect with people or kids. So anyway, with this kind of clarity and intention, we can live in a temptation-filled world, but stay spiritually connected and become deeply enriched by our devotional path. And that's what we're aiming to do here. Does anybody want to share anything about that? So sometimes when we start stepping back from the things that we used to chase hard, like ambition, status, success, people might mistake it for a lack of drive. Has that ever happened to anyone here? I know when I left my job to pursue service full time, I remember going home to see like my extended family, and they're like, "Oh, so you're not working?" And my family's like really in about like working and working hard, and I think that's great. Obviously, I think that's great. But I felt like a little bit of judgment there, you know, and it was like, actually, I'm working really hard, but my ladder's on a completely different tree now. I'm not climbing that same ladder anymore. I've just moved the location of my ladder to a different tree. I didn't say this because there's not really any point, but this is kind of, what I'm thinking. It's not a lack of drive. It's just changing what you're pursuing. So these things have happened. Wrong Wall by Kelly Woods. Hi, I haven't heard that. Is that a song, Andrew? I'll have to check it out. Yeah, that happens to so many of us, right? We spend all this time, all this energy, all this resources. Yeah, it's a song. Great. Yeah. And then we realize, like, what are we doing? My ladder's leaned against the wrong tree. And I feel like that was like, up until I was close to 30 years old, realizing that. And we have to work, many of us, we have to work, we have to make money, but like, where is our consciousness like fully engaged and invested in, and why? And that's what we really have to evaluate, right? But the society now, if you don't take that promotion, if you don't, do that thing that's best for your career, people kind of, because people value that so much, it's kind of looked at as like unambitious, right? And what they're not really seeing is that real renunciation doesn't come from weakness, it comes from clarity. True renunciants, they don't turn away from worldly possessions because they're too hard to get. They turn away because they see through them. They recognize that even the best worldly pleasures are temporary, and no material achievement can offer happiness that truly lasts. So they're not thinking this is too hard or this is too much work. No, they're thinking this is too small. This is too small. They're not less ambitious. They're actually more ambitious. They're aiming for something greater, a happiness that doesn't fade, a connection that never breaks. That's not even accessible in this material world. All happiness is going to fade. Every connection is going to break. So they're just, again, changing what tree their ladder is leaned against. And this is a logical conclusion too. Like, if we crave happiness constantly, shouldn't there be a kind of happiness that lasts constantly? And this is what the Gita teaches us, that this joy exists, that it's spiritual happiness, and then it's accessed by turning inward and connecting with the divine. And once that spark is lit, real seekers become deeply determined. Real seekers, they'll pay that price no matter how high. Letting go of temporary highs for the sake of something eternal. Because we only have so much room in that garden, right? And if we let the weeds take over, we're not going to be able to even see the flowers beneath. The weeds are just going to be taking over everything, our consciousness, our time, our resources. So that's why we have to, again, get selective about what we're pursuing, where we're spending our time, where we're spending our energy, who we're hanging out with, and what that's doing to our consciousness. And we make that decision based off of where we want to go at our final destination. What's the best route to take us there? So this isn't the absence of ambition. This is super ambition. And unfortunately, the way that our culture and the beliefs that our society likes to, support and endorse, it's the opposite. I just had a student the other day call me who was trying to decide if she should take this job or not because it was going to be good for her career and was, climbing up the ladder. But it required a move that she didn't really think would be so good for her spiritual life, and she was really concerned about it. And it's so refreshing, to hear that, because not that it's bad to take a promotion. It's great if your family needs it, or if, but at the same time, we really have to, the answer's not always yes. It's not always more pay, more it's sometimes it's it's no. Sometimes it's like, no, I think that I've gone far enough. I have enough. My family's supported. If I take more of this on, I'm going to be more stressed. It's going to be more responsibility that doesn't really align with the rest of my life right now. It's not always yes. And that's what we learn here in the Gita. It's to turn more towards spiritual pursuits and not let material pursuits take up our entirety. Because when that happens, we so easily it crowds the time, the space, the consciousness for spiritual pursuits, which really is our priority. The material pursuits should really just support the spiritual pursuits. If we really want to like perfect the equation, and if we really want the utmost happiness and connection, the material pursuits should really just support the spiritual pursuits, not the other way around. Does anybody want to share anything about that?
I actually turned down a job that made more money and everything because then I would have to work during the summer. And, my husband was off in the summer because he's a professor, and my kids were off in the summer, and I only worked 10 months in the academic. And I was offered, a promotion and more money, a lot more money, but I'd have to work 12 months. And every summer we would go to, visit ashrams and the devotees and our friends, and it was not worth it. And I said no, because it was like, what kind of life did I want to live? Because what
Yeah.
would that money get me? I would have lost the time with my kids, the time with my husband, the time with devotees. We don't live near a temple, so that was our only chance. So, yeah, late in life, you think, oh, I could have had more money in the bank, but I have all these treasured memories of times with devotees. So,
Hmm. Yeah. It's really nice. I was just talking to my mom yesterday about because eventually I'll probably have to go back to work just to make it work for our family eventually. Um, and I was talking to my mom about going back and getting like a teacher certificate so that I could do the same thing. And it would definitely be a drop in pay relative to what I'm used to, but that time, like you said, that time is with your family is so valuable that it's like let's just figure out how to make the rest of it work. Yeah. Thank you.
I think exactly where I'm at right now. Like, well, first I switched my job to where I work now because I was like, I need more time with my daughter. I need it to be functional so I can take her and pick her up from school. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, I need to work less so I can be home more and do make more time for spiritual life. And I'm always trying to adjust it to where it's like, okay, how can I spend less, make less, be home more, go to the temple more, make more time for spiritual life, like really trying to make that my goal in all that I'm doing. So yeah, I never wanted to chase a big fancy job. Like even when I was trying to, I kind of got caught up into it, and I was like, oh yeah, I want the higher promotion. I want to make the more money. And then once I got it, I was like, I hate this. Like I just want to be home. Like I don't know. I just want to be taking care of my kid. I just want to. And so I did. I remember when I first switched, though, it was like, what are people gonna think? I'm not using my college degree anymore. I'm gonna go work at a health food restaurant. It's like that seems like something you do when you're just out of high school. Like, I had all these stories of what I thought people would think or how society would view it. But honestly, it's been the best decision I ever made. Like,
Oh,
so yeah, I hear you on all those points too. Thank you.
so
and
nice.
and
Yeah.
you are using your college degree because you're a better thinker, you're more reflective. I mean, college is not just degree qualifications, it helps you explore the world, so that enriches your entire life, even if you don't use it according to what society said.
Yes, thank you for that. I agree.
Mhm. Thank you. Andrew, do you want to share with us?
Well, it, I was just talking and writing about this morning about It's about sacrifice. People always come up to me and say, "Oh, how can you give this up and how can you give that up? You get no onions, no garlic, no meat, no this, no that. How do you sacrifice all this stuff?" And they're like, "I could never give that up. I could never practice your practice because I could never give that up." And the reality is I didn't give all that up for my practice. My practice made me realize that other things were more important. And when I gave up those things, quote unquote, I gained so much more.
Right.
I mean, how much have you gained being a mother and all those things you had to give up to become a mother?
Right. Don't even think about it. It's not even a thing. Really need
Exactly.
like a spare second of time? Nah, who needs that?
Exactly. Forget your food on the altar for an hour, you know?
Yeah, seriously, forget that I'm doing my offering, say a quick apology. Yeah.
Hmm. It's how we view sacrifice.
Yeah, it's so true. So true. Once you start to taste what's available on the other side, it's like it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even just like that. Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Sela, did you want to add to that?
It's just it's not a sacrifice if it disgusts you, like meat, like people like, oh, how could you not? And it's like it's gross. Like I didn't think it was gross when I was little, but now I do. It's like that's not a sacrifice if you think it's gross, like
Well, what happens is your heart starts to change. You
yeah.
start to see every living entity as that, and it just you no longer want to enjoy them in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think of the little calf and the cow, crying and like how could you possibly, I don't know. Anyway,
But it's
it
okay
just
too. It's okay if you're not there yet. Because you just
no,
keep
it's
following the practice and it will shift in
it
its
will
own time.
shift
And that's no problem.
organically. Yeah, it'll unfold organically. That's what I mean. I never, it was, I didn't say, make a decision. I am giving this up before I was ready. It was just like, I don't want this anymore. Just, it was natural.
Yeah, yeah. No, that can happen. I think I flirted with it for a while. I like wanted to, but I wasn't quite there. And then I ate just fish. And so everybody has their own process, but yeah, that's nice. Thank you. Katie, please share with us. Oh no, you're frozen again, my friend. Oh, you're frozen. Okay, I'm gonna continue. Oh, are you there?
I'm here. Can you
Great.
hear me? Okay. Oh, sorry. The service seems worse lately. There's so many nuggets. There's so many nuggets in this beautiful class. Like, um, just in the last few shares, like when we think we need more or want more, sometimes I've realized like I have just enough. I have just enough. And sometimes it's marked by like, I can go on this retreat because a devotee friend set it up that I can work trade part of it, like by some miracle, or just someone saying, hey, I want to just, it's weird. It's like, sometimes I feel worried about lack and low wages and stuff. But then I'm like, somehow Krishna gives me like just exactly, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Um, and I've noticed that more in the last years or maybe been able to notice it more or something. And then the other one, like with the orientation, like you're talking about the ladder on a different tree, it was making me think how um beneficial it would be if I could change my mind's orientation, for example, at work to it more as a service. Like, how am I supporting my team members? How, like, instead of spending so much mental energy on things I've already mentioned to this group many times, what if I could just over and over try to remind myself, like, how can I make this a service to um, really good hearted people that are around me, and and how beneficial that could be. Yeah. And then, oh, with the balance stuff, I was thinking how like lately I've been having trouble balancing my 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 spiritual stuff and and feeling kind of like, oh no, I missed this one because I was too tired, and I missed that, and but I feel like, it's helping me realize it's okay to um miss a little bit because I want a lot, like
Mm,
I feel very committed to the Sage group thingo that I just started with Gandharvika, and very committed to this class, um and then I'm thinking, okay, just you have like things on offer every day, just pick a few each week and be happy to, like it's okay to not be consistent with each one because there's just like so much. And so that was helping me feel less. And I realized also I haven't been chanting as much, and I think I'm like, well, the time is going a little more towards lectures and kirtanic classes, and I'm like, but I know, like, not that it's ever dropped off completely, but it's just less.
yeah.
And then with the balance with the relationships and material world, it is kind of noticeable how our friendships with more like drinking buddies in the past, you know yeah, just as other people have mentioned, it's a little like tug on the heart, like worry that you want to keep some connection, and it's clear you're not there nearly as much as you used to be, but I don't miss it so much, and I feel a little bad about that. But anyway, those are just my ramblings about the points that we're jumping at, but they're all this just so many nuggets from everybody, so thank you so much.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. So happy you're here and sharing with us. So this last point that I want to touch on before we end for the day is the purport of this verse talks a lot about sex. And that's not to say that sex is inherently bad, but it's considered the highest form of pleasure in the material platform. And if we really think about it, so much of the world revolves around it. It's, and I just wanted to address this because it's talked about in the purport a lot, and I want to kind of dig into it a little bit. Is that when we think about sex, it's a major driving force behind societal behavior, personal ambition, entire industries, like especially marketing, markets to that. The message is find a partner, be attractive, and you'll be happy. And the reason that regulating sex life in our spiritual life is, kind of a principle is because a problem arises when our lives become centered around that pursuit of sex life, that pursuit of, being attractive, finding a partner. It's like it takes over our whole, before we know it, it's like, I remember when I was a kid, my stepdad used to tell me, why do men get up in the morning, Retta or Rachel? Why do men get dressed in the morning? Why do men do, he's trying to like hammer it into my head that men always thought about that, to like protect me. But, women do too. Women do too, in that they're like always trying to be attractive, or it really takes up a lot of the space in our consciousness. So this is why we regulate sex life, so that we don't become overly obsessed with this message of finding a partner, being attractive, being happy. Because when this happens, we start to overly identify with the body rather than the soul, because that is like 100% bodily identification. And when we're identifying with the body, we know that we're not identifying with the soul. It's not like they work together. They don't align. If we're identifying with the body, we're not identifying with the soul. And that's why we try to spiritualize things that we do with the body, so that they can help us to identify with the soul. But on their own, if we're just chasing something like that, like sex pleasure, then we're just overly identifying with the body. And that's blocking ourselves from accessing this deeper spiritual happiness. And to the extent, like we talked about, that we identify with the soul, bodily pleasures begin to lose their grip. So that's why this, I think sometimes spiritual life gets a bad rap, because it's like, because the sexual pleasure is such a big thing, and people don't want to give it up, and we don't, in spiritual life we regulate it, but we do have to kind of understand the place for that, and why that is so, because it so easily becomes our whole life without us even knowing it. And it might not be on such an obvious level, but on a deeper level, it can become consuming. So that's let's see. I don't have a lot of time left, so I won't go through all of this. But when we get serious about our spiritual life, our goal shifts, and it's not just about enjoyment anymore. It's about liberation, and ultimately our loving connection with God. And as our relationship with God deepens, our attraction to worldly pleasures deepen or weaken. Our attraction to worldly pleasures weaken. And this doesn't happen overnight. And we keep saying that. It's so important to know that, to not expect that it's a gradual transformation. And if we just take a little bit of time out of our day every day, commit to it, commit to the process, we'll see the grip on material pleasures weakening, right? We'll see that we're not so interested in what we used to pursue for, happiness anymore. And it's gradual. But this gradual detachment is actually one of the signs of our progress, right? And it's natural. Sometimes we'll feel like we're growing, other times maybe not. But the real marker is, are we becoming less dependent on external pleasures and more content with inner joy? And how does this inner happiness grow? It starts with hearing. Exactly what you're here doing right now. This is how it starts. By regularly hearing Gita wisdom, we begin to understand that material pleasures are temporary and often end in frustration or exhaustion. And this insight, it helps us move towards the kind of joy that doesn't fade. And then as we experience more of this inner happiness, it becomes easier to let go of outer pleasures. And the less that we're invested in chasing these temporary highs, the more that we're open to lasting fulfillment. But if we stop hearing regularly, we might notice that this progress slows. That the pull of outer pleasure starts to grow stronger. More weeds start coming up in our garden. Right? And if we're not careful, the weeds might take over our entire garden. So that's why this steady hearing and practice are essential. They keep us anchored and moving towards happiness that truly satisfies. So as we wrap up here, just to kind of reiterate this key takeaway, it's that true happiness is not about getting everything we think that we want from the outside world. It's about turning inward, connecting with our deeper self, and ultimately with God, who's the source of all the joy. And the more that we nurture this connection, the more that we experience a happiness that's unshakable and imperishable. But it's a gradual process of learning to tune out those loud, fleeting desires, and focus on the deeper, lasting ones. And when we do this, we begin to realize that the pursuit of material pleasure often leaves us wanting more, while spiritual fulfillment fills us up completely. It's about chasing the kind of happiness that nourishes us from the inside, not the kind that fades with time. So as we continue on our spiritual journey, let's just try to keep in mind that the real source of joy is within. And the more that we connect with that inner happiness, the less we'll be swayed by the ups and downs of the external world. And that's ultimately where the true unlimited happiness lies. So that's all that I had today. Does anybody want to share anything before we finish? Yay, Kapana, please share.
Desires is such a unlimited topic, right? You can go on and on and on, like you said, about once this podcast is over, we're all going to get into some or the other thing, and then we forget that what is important, the inside is important. And then Mariah also, she said about unpacking. I would have done the same thing, not to worry about that. If the weather is so nice, just sit outside and chant. Whenever we think about that, that is also more important. And the third thing about the garden and the weeds, I've heard that from a very nice Christian guy before. And it is so nice to hear that again and again. That the flowery or the plant that we want to grows so slowly, and the weeds are there to disturb us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share anything before we leave for the day? Okay, my friends. Well, I will see you on Monday then. Thanks for
Hare
coming.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hi,
Krishna.
Krishna.
Haribo.